Chapter 1. The First Signs. It all began in late 2019. The city of Wuhan, China, was busy as usual. People filled the markets, the streets, and the restaurants. Life was normal. It was winter, and the air was cold. Nobody knew what was coming. In December, something strange happened. A few people got very sick. At first, it seemed like the flu. They had fevers. They coughed a lot. But it was different. This illness was harder to treat. Doctors were confused. One hospital in Wuhan started to see more cases. A young doctor named Li Wenliang noticed a pattern. He thought the illness might be serious. He spoke to other doctors. "This could be like SARS," he said. SARS was another virus that spread in 2003. It made many people sick. Some died. Li Wenliang wanted to warn everyone. But his warning was not welcomed. Authorities told him to stay quiet. They said, "Do not spread rumors." He felt helpless. Still, he tried to help his patients. He worked long hours. He was worried, but he didn't stop. Meanwhile, the cases grew. A market in Wuhan became the focus. It was a seafood market. They sold live animals there too. The market was crowded and noisy. Many people who worked or shopped there got sick. The market was quickly closed. But it was too late. The virus had already spread. Scientists began to investigate. They found something shocking. The illness came from a new virus. It was not SARS. It was similar, but different. They named it CoronaVirus. Later, it would be called COVID-19. The virus was strong. It spread easily from person to person. People didn't know how to stop it. Doctors in Wuhan became very busy. The hospitals were full. More patients arrived every day. Some were old, some were young. Many had trouble breathing. Families were scared. Some stayed home, hoping to stay safe. Others rushed to hospitals, looking for help. There were not enough beds. There were not enough supplies. Doctors and nurses worked day and night. They were tired, but they kept going. Li Wenliang, the young doctor, kept trying to warn others. He spoke online. He said, "This virus is dangerous. Be careful." His words reached some people, but not enough. Then, something tragic happened. Li Wenliang himself got sick. He had caught the virus. He became a patient in his own hospital. His friends and family were heartbroken. He was only 34 years old. He died in February 2020. His death shocked the world. People began to listen. They began to worry. Outside Wuhan, people started asking questions. Was this virus only in China? Was it already in other places? The truth was frightening. The virus had started to travel. People who left Wuhan carried it with them. They went to other cities, other countries. The virus went with them. News of the virus spread faster than the virus itself. People turned on their TVs. They checked their phones. Headlines said, "New virus in China." Some people were curious. Others were scared. Questions filled the air. How far would it go? Could it be stopped? In Wuhan, life changed completely. The government decided to act. The city was locked down. Nobody could leave. Streets were empty. Shops were closed. It was like a ghost town. For the people of Wuhan, life was no longer normal. They stayed inside their homes. Some felt safe. Others felt trapped. Families worried about loved ones. If someone got sick, it was hard to visit them. Hospitals were crowded. People felt helpless. The virus was invisible. Nobody knew who had it. Nobody knew if they would catch it next. Scientists worked quickly. They wanted to understand the virus. They studied its shape, its behavior, its secrets. They learned it came from animals, but it had jumped to humans. They also learned how it spread. A cough, a sneeze, even a simple touch could pass it to someone else. The virus had one big weapon: time. It could spread before symptoms appeared. A person could feel fine, but still pass it to others. This made it dangerous. This made it hard to control. The world began to pay attention. Airports started checking travelers. Some countries banned flights from China. Others prepared their hospitals. But for many, it felt distant. They thought, this is China's problem. They didn't know. The virus was already on its way. As January turned into February, the first cases appeared outside China, in Thailand, in Japan, in South Korea, then in Italy, Iran, the United States. One by one, countries began to face the virus. One by one, they realized how serious it was. In Wuhan, people tried to stay hopeful. Neighbors shared food. Families played games at home. Some sang songs to feel less alone. Others prayed. They hoped for an end. But the virus kept spreading. Each day, the numbers grew. For the doctors and nurses, it was a battle. They wore masks and suits to protect themselves. But they were afraid. Many got sick. Some even died. They were heroes, but they felt human. They felt tired. They felt sad. Outside China, people watched closely. Could Wuhan stop the virus? Could it be contained? Some countries sent help. Supplies, money, and experts arrived. But time was running out. The virus was faster than anyone expected. The first signs were clear now. This was no ordinary illness. This was a global threat. The world had to act. But how? Would countries work together, or would they face it alone? In Wuhan, people waited for answers. They waited for help. They waited for hope. The story was just beginning. Chapter 2. The virus spreads. It started slowly, almost invisibly. The virus, now called COVID-19, had left Wuhan. It traveled with people, on buses, on trains, and on planes. Nobody could see it, but it was there. Silently, it began to spread. At first, most people were not worried. They thought, it's far away, it's not here. Life continued as usual. Airports were busy, borders stayed open, people traveled for work, for holidays, for family. But the virus traveled too. It did not need a passport. In January 2020, the first cases appeared outside China. Thailand was the first, then Japan, then South Korea. Governments watched closely. Some countries started checking travelers. They used thermometers at airports. But it was not enough. COVID-19 moved faster than anyone expected. In February, something changed. The virus reached Italy. The first cases were in a small town. Doctors there were surprised. They asked, "How did this happen?" The answer was frightening. The virus had been spreading quietly. By the time doctors noticed, it was already too late. In Italy, cases exploded. One person got sick, then 5, then 50, then hundreds. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses worked non-stop. They wore masks, gloves, and protective suits. But they were scared. Many of them got sick too. The situation in Italy shocked the world. People saw videos of crowded hospitals, doctors cried, patients begged for air. Some people died alone without their families. The sadness was too much to bear. Italy became the center of the pandemic. Other countries watched. They thought, will this happen to us? Some acted quickly. They closed schools. They canceled large events. Others waited. They hoped it would not come to them. But the virus was already spreading. In Iran, the first cases appeared in February. The virus spread quickly there too. Many people in Iran got very sick. The hospitals were not ready. Supplies ran out. Doctors had to make hard choices. Who would get care? Who would not? It was heartbreaking. By March, the virus had reached the United States. The first cases were small, a few people in one state, then another. But it spread fast. New York City was hit the hardest. Hospitals filled with patients. Doctors had to set up beds in hallways. People stood in long lines for COVID-19 tests. Fear gripped the city. Across the world, people started to panic. They saw the news. They heard about rising cases. They wondered, am I safe? Will my family be okay? Some people stayed home. Others bought supplies. Shelves in stores were empty. Masks, hand sanitizer, even toilet paper disappeared. But not everyone believed the virus was real. Some said, it's just the flu. Others thought, it's far away, it won't come here. These doubts allowed the virus to spread even more. In South Korea, the government acted quickly. They tested thousands of people every day. They tracked the virus carefully. It worked. South Korea slowed the spread. Their actions became a model for others. But not every country had the resources to follow. The virus did not care about borders. It reached Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. It was everywhere. Each country faced its own challenges. Some, like New Zealand, closed their borders early. Others waited too long. Lockdowns began. In Italy, people were told to stay home. The streets were empty. Famous landmarks like the Colosseum and the canals of Venice were silent. In Spain, the same thing happened. People stayed inside. They sang from their windows. Their voices filled the empty streets. In the United States, lockdowns came late. Some states acted quickly. Others waited. The virus spread unevenly. Some places were hit hard. Others stayed quiet, for now. Meanwhile, doctors and scientists worked day and night. They studied the virus. How did it spread? How could it be stopped? They discovered it was airborne. Tiny droplets carried the virus. Coughing, sneezing, even speaking could spread it. Masks became essential. But many people did not like wearing them. The virus moved fast. Numbers rose each day. 1 million cases, 2 million, 3. Governments had to act, schools closed, restaurants shut down. People worked from home. Life changed in every way. For many, this was the hardest time of their lives. Parents worried about their children. Elderly people were alone. Some lost jobs, others lost loved ones. The virus touched everyone. But even in the darkest moments, there was light. Neighbors helped each other. Communities came together. In Wuhan, volunteers delivered food. In Italy, people cheered for healthcare workers. In Spain, they clapped every night at 8 p.m. for the doctors and nurses who saved lives. The virus spread sadness, but it also brought kindness. People showed courage. They adapted. They learned to live differently. Zoom calls replaced family dinners. Online classes replaced schools. It was strange, but it worked. By the end of March, COVID-19 was a global pandemic. No country was safe. No one was untouched. The virus had changed the world. But people did not give up. They fought back. Doctors worked harder. Scientists searched for solutions. Families stayed strong. The story of the virus was far from over. It had spread across the globe. But the world was ready to fight. Together, people would face the challenge. Together, they would find a way forward. Chapter 3. Lockdowns. Begin. It started with a simple order. Stay home. At first, people were confused. Could this really happen? Would entire cities shut down? But soon, it became real. One by one, countries announced lockdowns. Life, as the world knew it, stopped. In Wuhan, the streets were already empty. The lockdown there was strict. Nobody could leave their homes except for emergencies. Grocery stores were closed, schools were shut, and factories stopped working. The once busy city became silent. Only the sound of ambulance sirens broke the quiet. Other countries watched and learned. Italy was next. The virus had spread quickly there, and hospitals were full. The government decided no one could leave their house without a reason. Police patrolled the streets. People stayed indoors, looking out of their windows. In some cities, famous landmarks like the Colosseum and St. Peter's Square stood empty. It was eerie and sad. In Spain, lockdowns followed soon after. Families stayed together in small apartments. Children couldn't play outside. Parents worked from home, trying to stay calm. At 8 p.m. every night, the people of Spain opened their windows. They clapped and cheered for doctors, nurses, and ambulance drivers. It was a small moment of hope in the silence. Around the world, life changed. Schools moved online. Teachers spoke to students through screens. Children missed their friends. They sat in front of computers, trying to learn. But it wasn't the same. Weddings were canceled. Funerals were small. Some families couldn't even say goodbye to loved ones. The virus was everywhere, and it felt like it would never end. In New York City, the lockdown was dramatic. The city that never slept suddenly went quiet. Times Square was empty. Broadway went dark. Subways ran with almost no passengers. Millions of people stayed home. Some felt safe, Others felt trapped. Fear hung in the air. Lockdowns were different in every country. In India, the rules were strict. Millions of people lived in small homes with large families. Staying inside was hard. Some couldn't work and had no money for food. Volunteers stepped in to help. They brought meals to those in need. Communities tried to take care of each other, even in hard times. In Australia, the lockdowns were long. People couldn't travel between states. Borders were closed. Even beaches were empty. Australians, known for their outdoor lifestyles, suddenly found themselves stuck at home. But they followed the rules, hoping it would end the virus. For some, lockdowns were a time to reflect. They read books. They cooked meals. They spent time with family. But for others, it was lonely. Elderly people couldn't see their children or grandchildren. Many felt isolated. Birthdays were celebrated over video calls. It was strange, but it became normal. Outside, nature changed too. With fewer cars on the road, the air became cleaner. In India, people could see the Himalayan mountains for the first time in decades. In Venice, the canals became clear. Fish swam through the water. Animals roamed freely in some cities. Nature seemed to be healing, even as people stayed locked inside. Not everyone followed the rules. Some broke lockdown orders. They went to parties, beaches, and gatherings. This made others angry. The virus spread more because of these actions. Governments tried to stop it. Fines were given. Police set up roadblocks. But it wasn't easy. People were tired. They wanted their old lives back. The lockdowns brought fear, but also creativity. Musicians played songs from balconies. Artists painted messages of hope on walls. People shared jokes and videos online to make each other laugh. Communities found ways to connect, even when they were apart. Hospitals remained busy. Doctors and nurses worked harder than ever. Some slept in hospitals, afraid to go home and risk infecting their families. Many healthcare workers got sick. Some died. Their sacrifices were deeply felt. Around the world, people called them heroes. The economy suffered too. Shops, restaurants, and businesses closed. Millions of people lost their jobs. It was a hard time for families. They worried about money, about food, and about their future. Governments gave aid to some, but it wasn't enough for everyone. Lockdowns also brought questions. How long would they last? Could the virus really be stopped? Scientists said, we need time to make a vaccine. But vaccines take months, even years. People wondered, can we wait that long? In some places, the lockdowns worked. New Zealand acted quickly. They closed their borders and locked down early. The virus was controlled, and life there returned to normal faster than in other countries. But not every country was so lucky. The virus kept spreading, even in lockdown. The emotional toll was heavy. Parents worried about their children. Grandparents missed their families. Friends couldn't hug. Couples were separated. People cried alone, feeling helpless. But even in the sadness, there was strength. People found ways to stay hopeful. They wrote letters. They sent messages of love. They shared their stories. Lockdowns were not just about stopping the virus. They were also about saving lives. Without them, hospitals would have collapsed. Doctors reminded everyone, "Stay home. You are helping more than you know." The world felt strange and quiet. Planes stopped flying. Trains sat still. Famous cities became ghost towns. Yet, in the silence, there was a feeling of unity. Everyone was fighting the same battle. Everyone hoped for the same thing: an end to the virus. As the weeks turned into months, people adjusted. Masks became normal. Social distancing was part of life. People waited for good news. They hoped the lockdowns would end soon. But nobody knew how long it would take. The lockdowns were hard, but they showed the world something important. People are strong. They can adapt. They can find light, even in the darkest times. The fight against the virus was far from over, but the world was learning. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Together, they would find a way forward. Chapter 4. Italy's Dark Days. In February 2020, Italy became the epicenter of the pandemic. It started in the north, in Lombardy. A few cases turned into hundreds, then thousands. Hospitals filled quickly. Doctors and nurses were overwhelmed. The virus spread faster than anyone had expected. In Bergamo, the situation was worst. Ambulances came day and night. Sirens filled the air. Hospitals ran out of beds. Patients waited in hallways. Doctors worked non-stop. Nurses cared for as many as they could. But it was not enough. Families were terrified. A mother coughed, then her son. A father struggled to breathe. Whole households became sick. Many were sent to hospitals, but some never came home. Goodbyes were said over phone calls. It was heartbreaking. The virus spread like wildfire. Streets emptied. Shops closed. Schools shut their doors. Everyone stayed inside. In small towns, the silence was heavy. In big cities, the quiet was strange. Italy, a country full of life, now seemed lifeless. Doctors faced impossible choices. Ventilators were limited. They had to decide: who gets a chance to live? Who doesn't? These decisions haunted them. Many cried. Some couldn't sleep. Others wrote letters to their families, afraid they might not survive either. The virus did not spare the healthcare workers. Many caught COVID-19 while treating others. Some became too sick to work. A few lost their lives. Yet, the rest kept going. They wore heavy protective suits. Masks left marks on their faces. They didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Every day, the news got worse. The death toll rose. Obituaries filled newspapers. Trucks from the army carried coffins away because local cemeteries were full. The world watched in horror. Italy's tragedy was a warning to everyone. But even in the darkest moments, there was light. Italians found ways to stay hopeful. Families sang from their balconies. Neighbors clapped together, even though they were apart. A violinist played for his street. filling the air with music. These small acts brought comfort. One night in Rome, a woman placed candles on her balcony. She lit one for each of her neighbors who had died. The candles glowed softly in the dark. People from nearby windows watched silently. It was a moment of shared grief, but also shared hope. Children painted rainbows and hung them in windows. They wrote messages. Andrà tutto bene. Everything will be okay. These signs became symbols of strength. They reminded everyone to keep going. The government worked to slow the spread. Lockdowns became stricter. Police checked the streets. Only essential workers could leave their homes. People wore masks and gloves. They stood far apart in long lines for groceries. Everyone tried to follow the rules. They knew it was the only way to save lives. Scientists studied the virus. They learned how it attacked the lungs. They tested treatments, but a cure was still far away. Italians prayed for answers. They prayed for relief. Families stayed connected through phones and computers. Grandparents waved to grandchildren over video calls. Friends shared jokes and stories online. Technology became a lifeline. It brought people together, even when they were apart. Volunteers helped those in need. In Naples, a man filled baskets with food and hung them from his balcony. A note read, "If you need something, take it. If you can give something, leave it." This simple gesture inspired others. Kindness spread across the country. Hospitals received help, too. Donations came from around the world. Protective gear, ventilators, and money arrived. These gifts gave hope to the doctors and nurses fighting every day. They knew they were not alone. Despite everything, Italians did not lose their spirit. One evening, an opera singer stood on his balcony in Florence. He sang a powerful song. His voice echoed through the empty streets. People listened from their windows. Some cried. Others applauded. In that moment, they felt united. Still, the pain was deep. Families mourned loved ones. Many could not hold funerals. They could only remember and grieve from afar. Priests blessed coffins in silence. It was a sorrow that no one would ever forget. By the end of March, the curve began to flatten. Fewer people were getting sick. Hospitals started to catch their breath, but the scars remained. Italy had lost so much, yet the people stood strong. Italy's dark days taught the world an important lesson. The virus was real. It was deadly, and it could spread anywhere. Other countries began to prepare. They closed borders. They locked down cities. Italy's pain had saved lives in other places. But Italy also showed the world something else: resilience. Even in tragedy, the human spirit shines. The singing, the rainbows, the candles, they proved that hope is always stronger than fear. As April arrived, the lockdown continued. People longed for normal life. They missed hugs, handshakes, and crowded piazzas. But they knew the fight was not over. They had survived the worst. Now, they had to rebuild. Italy's story was one of sadness, courage, and unity. It reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, there is light, and together, people can face anything. The fight was not finished, but Italy had shown the way forward. The world watched and learned. The story of the virus continued, but so did the story of hope. Chapter 5. Heroes in Scrubs. In every country, they were there. Healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, and hospital staff stood on the front line. They fought the virus head-on. They worked long hours, often without rest. They faced danger every single day. For many, they were the true heroes of the pandemic. Hospitals were full. More patients arrived each hour. Some came with fevers. Others struggled to breathe. Every case was urgent. Healthcare workers rushed from one patient to the next. Their faces were tired, but they kept moving. Protective gear was their armor. Masks, gloves, and gowns covered their bodies. Face shields hid their eyes. These items were supposed to protect them. But sometimes the virus still got through. Some workers fell sick. They had tried to save others, but now they needed saving. Every shift was a challenge. Nurses changed IVs and checked oxygen levels. Doctors made hard decisions. A paramedic carried an elderly woman into an ambulance. She whispered, "Thank you," as tears filled her eyes. Moments like this stayed with them forever. Hospitals ran out of space. In some cities, parking lots became wards. Tents were set up for extra beds. Nurses worked outside, even in the cold. Inside the hospitals, supplies ran low. Masks were reused. Gloves were washed. It was not ideal, but they had no choice. Some healthcare workers stayed away from their families. They were afraid of bringing the virus home. They slept in hotels, in garages, even in their cars. They missed their children, their spouses, their parents. They were lonely, but they kept going. They knew they had a duty. Their work was not just physical. It was emotional, too. A nurse held the hand of a dying patient. No family was allowed to visit. "You are not alone," she whispered. A doctor cried quietly after losing a young patient. A cleaner sanitized a room where a life had just ended. Every worker felt the weight of the virus. But there were moments of hope. A patient who had been on a ventilator for weeks finally opened his eyes. A nurse smiled as a mother and baby were discharged together, both healthy. A team of doctors cheered when an elderly woman, 94 years old, recovered and left the hospital. These victories gave them strength. Healthcare workers formed teams. They supported each other. When one person felt weak, another stepped in. When someone cried, a friend offered a shoulder. They were like family. They had to be. The virus had created a bond between them that no one else could understand. Around the world, people showed their gratitude. In Spain, at 8 p.m. every evening, neighbors clapped from their balconies. In New York City, fire trucks and police cars sounded their sirens in front of hospitals. In India, flower petals were dropped from helicopters onto hospital grounds. These gestures meant everything to the workers. They reminded them that their sacrifices mattered. But the fight was not easy. Some workers became depressed. The constant stress was too much. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't eat. Some felt guilty when they couldn't save a life. Others felt helpless when the virus kept spreading. Yet, even in their darkest moments, they stayed. They put on their scrubs and masks each morning. They walked into the hospitals, ready to fight again. They reminded themselves, "This is why I became a doctor. This is why I became a nurse, to help people." Families of healthcare workers worried every day. A child hugged his mother tightly before she left for work. "Please don't get sick," he whispered. A husband waited at home, praying his wife would return safely. A father sent texts to his daughter saying, "Be careful." Healthcare workers made sacrifices. Some missed birthdays and anniversaries. Others couldn't celebrate holidays with their families. They chose to stay on the front lines, knowing the risks. It was hard, but they believed in their mission. Governments worked to provide more help. Supplies arrived: masks, gloves, ventilators. Volunteers sewed protective gowns and delivered meals to hospitals. Communities raised money to support healthcare workers. These efforts brought hope and reminded everyone that they were not alone. Still, the virus kept spreading. The numbers climbed higher, but the workers never gave up. They found ways to cope. A nurse played music for her patients. A doctor told jokes to make a frightened child smile. A janitor left small notes of encouragement on hospital walls. These little acts of kindness made a big difference. The fight against the virus was not only in hospitals, it was also in research labs. Scientists worked to develop treatments and vaccines. But until a solution came, the healthcare workers carried the burden. They knew the road was long, but they were determined to walk it. One day, a nurse received a letter from a former patient. It said, "You saved my life. I will never forget you." Another doctor was surprised by a video call from a family whose father had survived COVID-19. "You're our hero," they said. These moments reminded the workers why they kept fighting. Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs and stethoscopes. Sometimes they carry mops or drive ambulances. These heroes worked quietly, without expecting fame. They simply wanted to save lives. The world will always remember their courage, their long hours, their sleepless nights, their tears, and their strength. They faced a deadly virus, and they fought back with everything they had. They showed us what it means to be brave. Even now, their work continues. The pandemic is not over. But because of these heroes, the world has hope. They remind us that, in the face of danger, humanity's spirit shines brightest. Healthcare workers are more than professionals. They are protectors, healers, and warriors. They are the reason so many survived. They are the reason we believe in a better tomorrow. They are the heroes in scrubs. Before we begin Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on WooEnglish. Remember, this content is specially made for WooEnglish listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of WooEnglish's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6: The United States in Crisis. The virus arrived quietly in the United States. The first cases appeared in January 2020. Most people were not worried. It seemed far away, like something happening in other countries. But by March, everything had changed. COVID-19 spread across the U.S. Numbers began to rise quickly. New York City became the center of the crisis. Hospitals filled faster than anyone expected. Ambulances rushed through empty streets. Sirens echoed day and night. Doctors and nurses worked without rest. Beds were full. Some patients were treated in hallways. The situation felt impossible. In Central Park, tents were set up as makeshift hospitals. The city needed more space. A Navy ship, the USNS Comfort, arrived to help. Its rooms became hospital beds. But even this was not enough. New York was overwhelmed. Healthcare workers were exhausted. They worked long shifts, often wearing the same mask for days. Supplies were running out. Doctors used garbage bags as protective gowns. Nurses cried in break rooms, but they returned to their patients. They were the front line, and they refused to give up. The virus spread beyond New York. Cases appeared in California, Florida, and Texas. No state was safe. Schools closed. Businesses shut their doors. People stayed home, trying to slow the spread. But the virus moved faster. Hospitals in small towns were hit hard. Some didn't have enough ventilators. Others didn't have enough doctors. Testing became a major issue. At first, there were not enough tests. People waited in long lines at drive-through centers. Some never got tested at all. Without tests, it was hard to track the virus. It spread quietly, infecting more and more people. Leaders had to act. Governors gave daily updates. They asked people to wear masks, wash hands, and stay 6 feet apart. Some states imposed lockdowns. Others resisted. There was confusion, even anger. Not everyone agreed on what to do. The federal government declared a national emergency. Money was sent to hospitals and communities. Scientists worked around the clock to study the virus. The Centers for Disease Control, CDC, gave advice. But the country was divided. Some listened, others did not. Volunteers stepped up to help. In Seattle, a group of people sewed masks for healthcare workers. In Chicago, restaurants delivered free meals to hospitals. In Atlanta, neighbors checked on elderly residents, bringing them groceries and medicine. Across the country, small acts of kindness brought people together. Meanwhile, scientists searched for answers. At research labs, they studied the virus under microscopes. How did it spread? How could it be stopped? Teams worked to develop vaccines. It was a race against time. In Washington, D.C., politicians debated solutions. Some wanted stricter rules. Others worried about the economy. Millions of Americans had lost their jobs. Families struggled to pay bills. Food banks were overwhelmed. The crisis was not just about health. It was about survival. The news showed heartbreaking stories. Families said goodbye to loved ones over video calls. A nurse in Detroit held the hand of a dying patient. In Los Angeles, a doctor hugged a young boy who had just lost his father. The virus did not discriminate. It affected everyone, from children to grandparents. But there were also stories of hope. A woman in Boston left her hospital after weeks on a ventilator. In Miami, a 99-year-old man recovered and danced with his nurse. These moments gave people strength. They reminded everyone that survival was possible. In April, the situation reached its peak. New York's hospitals were pushed to the limit. Funeral homes were overwhelmed. Refrigerated trucks became temporary morgues. The city felt broken, but slowly, the numbers began to stabilize. Lockdowns were working. Across the country, people found ways to adapt. Schools moved online. Teachers gave lessons over Zoom. Parents worked from home, balancing jobs and childcare. Couples postponed weddings. Grandparents waved to grandchildren through windows. Life was not the same, but it continued. Communities supported each other. In Denver, people cheered for healthcare workers at 7 p.m. every evening. In Houston, a grocery store gave free food to families in need. In New Orleans, musicians played on porches to keep the city's spirit alive. These moments brought light in a dark time. Still, the virus continued to spread. By summer, cases rose in other states. Florida became a new hotspot. Texas followed. Hospitals there faced the same challenges New York had seen months earlier. Doctors warned, "This is not over." Masks became a symbol of the fight. Some people wore them. Others refused. This led to arguments in stores, on buses, even in families. Scientists said masks saved lives, but not everyone listened. The divide in the country grew wider. Through it all, healthcare workers remained strong. A nurse in Arizona said, "We are tired, but we will keep fighting." A doctor in Louisiana shared, "Every life matters. We will not give up." Their courage inspired the nation. By the end of 2020, vaccines were ready. The news brought hope. Scientists had worked faster than ever before. But the fight was far from over. Vaccines had to be distributed. Millions of doses were needed. Logistics were a challenge. The United States had faced one of its greatest tests. The virus exposed weaknesses, but it also revealed strength. Communities came together. Neighbors helped each other. Healthcare workers showed unimaginable bravery. The crisis was not just about numbers. It was about people. It was about loss, love, and resilience. The story of the United States in the pandemic was one of pain, but also of hope. The fight continued, but the country had learned an important lesson. Together, anything is possible. The world watched, and the story unfolded. What would happen next? Only time would tell. Chapter 7. Stories of Resilience. The pandemic brought fear and loss, but it also showed the strength of the human spirit. Around the world, people found ways to help each other. These acts of kindness lit up the darkest days. They proved that even in a global crisis, hope could shine bright. In India, streets fell silent during the lockdown. But every evening, something special happened. At 5 p.m., people came to their balconies and windows. They clapped, banged pots, and rang bells. The sound echoed through empty neighborhoods. It was a way to thank healthcare workers, the doctors, nurses, and ambulance drivers fighting the virus. The noise was loud and joyful. It reminded everyone that they were not alone. In Spain, neighbors formed new connections. Many lived in small apartments and couldn't leave their homes. To stay connected, they waved from their windows. They shouted greetings across the streets. Some sang songs together, creating a chorus of hope. Others helped in practical ways. A young man shopped for his elderly neighbors, leaving groceries at their doors. A woman cooked extra meals for families who couldn't afford food. These small actions made a big difference. Brazil faced its own challenges. The virus hit hard, especially in poor communities. But even in these difficult times, people stood together. In Rio de Janeiro, a group of volunteers started a food bank. They collected rice, beans, and vegetables. Then, they delivered the food to families in need. One volunteer said, "When we share, we all survive." These acts of generosity kept people fed and hopeful. In Italy, balcony singing became a symbol of resilience. During lockdown, Italians couldn't leave their homes. But they didn't let sadness take over. Instead, they sang. From Naples to Milan, voices filled the air. A man in Rome played the guitar for his neighbors. A violinist in Florence performed for his street. Their music carried messages of unity and love. In South Africa, communities worked together to protect the most vulnerable. In Soweto, a group of women sewed masks for free. They handed them out to anyone who needed one. "A mask can save a life," one woman explained. Others delivered soap and hand sanitizer to families who couldn't afford it. These efforts helped slow the spread of the virus. Technology also played a role in spreading kindness. In Japan, a teacher recorded videos of himself reading stories. He sent them to his students who missed their classroom. In the United States, musicians gave free online concerts. Families gathered around screens to watch. In the United Kingdom, a 100-year-old man named Captain Tom Moore walked laps in his garden to raise money for healthcare workers. His effort inspired millions and raised over 30 million. People called him a hero. Children around the world found creative ways to share hope. In Germany, they drew rainbows and hung them in windows. In Canada, they wrote thank you letters to doctors and nurses. In Australia, a group of kids started a virtual choir. They sang a song about staying strong. Their voices came together online, sending a powerful message of unity. In Kenya, teachers visited students at home. Schools were closed, and many children didn't have internet access. To keep them learning, teachers traveled from house to house. They brought books and gave short lessons while staying a safe distance away. Parents were grateful. One mother said, "Education is hope for the future." Businesses also stepped up to help. In France, a bakery gave free bread to people who had lost their jobs. In Mexico, a restaurant cooked meals for hospital workers. In China, a company donated thousands of masks to schools and nursing homes. These acts of generosity reminded people that kindness could come from anywhere. Healthcare workers around the world inspired resilience. In Canada, a nurse shared stories of recovery to give her community hope. In Peru, a doctor danced for his patients to lift their spirits. In Nigeria, a hospital cleaner sang hymns as she worked. Her voice brought peace to patients and staff alike. Communities came together in unexpected ways. In Thailand, a group of farmers donated vegetables to city markets. They wanted to help families struggling to buy food. In Norway, people left boxes of free supplies at bus stops. Inside were masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. Anyone could take what they needed. Even animals brought comfort during the pandemic. In the Netherlands, therapy dogs visited hospitals to cheer up patients and staff. In India, cows wandered into quiet streets, reminding people of simpler times. In New Zealand, a zookeeper live-streamed videos of penguins and giraffes. These small joys brought smiles to millions. Faith played a role for many. In Indonesia, mosques broadcast prayers over speakers. In Israel, churches rang bells. In the United States, synagogues held online services. People turned to their beliefs for strength. They prayed for an end to the virus and for healing around the world. Resilience also came from stories of survival. In Brazil, a 107-year-old woman recovered from COVID-19. Her family called her a fighter. In India, a man sold his wedding ring to buy oxygen for a stranger. In Italy, a grandmother who survived the virus said, "Life is precious. Every moment matters." As months passed, the pandemic continued, but so did the kindness. A woman in Argentina painted rocks with words like hope and courage. She left them in parks for others to find. A chef in Singapore made thousands of meals for families in need. In Russia, a group of teenagers delivered groceries to elderly neighbors. The stories were endless. They came from every corner of the world. They reminded people that, even in the hardest times, humans can be extraordinary. Acts of kindness didn't stop the virus, but they gave people strength to keep fighting. These moments of resilience showed that no matter how dark things seemed, light could always be found. Around the globe, people stood together, sometimes physically apart, but united in spirit. The pandemic tested humanity, but it also revealed its greatest strength: compassion. Chapter 8. The Race for a Vaccine. The world was in crisis. Millions of people were sick. Thousands were dying each day. The virus seemed unstoppable. But in labs around the globe, scientists were fighting back. They were racing to create a vaccine. It was a race against time. A vaccine would change everything. It could save lives. It could end the pandemic. It could bring the world back to normal. But making a vaccine wasn't easy. It usually took years, even decades. Now, scientists had to do it in months. The pressure was enormous. In labs, teams worked day and night. They wore white coats and protective gear. They studied the virus under microscopes. They tested samples, wrote reports, and shared results. Every hour mattered. Every step brought them closer to a solution. The world watched and waited. Who would succeed first? In the United States, pharmaceutical companies like Moderna and Pfizer worked tirelessly. In the United Kingdom, Oxford University joined forces with AstraZeneca. In China, scientists raced to develop their own vaccine. In Russia, a team announced progress on Sputnik 5. Everyone was trying. Everyone wanted to win. The process was complex. First, scientists had to study the virus. They needed to understand how it worked. COVID-19 was tricky. It spread quickly and attacked the lungs. But scientists found a key. The virus had spike proteins. These spikes helped it enter human cells. If a vaccine could block the spikes, the virus could be stopped. The next step was testing. Vaccines had to be tested on animals first. This showed if they were safe. If successful, trials moved to humans. Volunteers stepped forward. Some were young, others were old. They rolled up their sleeves, ready to help. They knew the risks, but believed in the mission. In Phase 1, trials, small groups received the vaccine. Scientists checked for safety. In Phase 2, larger groups were tested. Did the vaccine work? Did it create immunity? Finally, in Phase 3, thousands of people were involved. This was the most important step. It showed if the vaccine could protect against COVID-19. The trials were not easy. Some vaccines failed. Others caused side effects. But teams kept going. They learned from mistakes. They improved their formulas. They worked harder. The world held its breath. News about vaccines filled headlines. People asked, when will it be ready? Families hoped for answers. Businesses needed solutions. Healthcare workers prayed for relief. Everyone was waiting. In November 2020, the first breakthrough came. Pfizer announced their vaccine was successful. It was 95% effective. The news spread like wildfire. People cheered. Hope returned. Moderna followed soon after. Their vaccine was also highly effective. The race was not over, but the finish line was in sight. Governments acted quickly. They ordered millions of doses. Factories began production. Trucks and planes prepared for delivery. But there was a problem. Demand was higher than supply. Not everyone could get the vaccine at once. Distribution became a challenge. Rich countries bought doses first. Poorer nations had to wait. The world asked, is this fair? Organizations like the World Health Organization, WHO, pushed for equal access. A program called COVAX was created. Its goal was to deliver vaccines to every corner of the globe. The vaccines brought hope, but also questions. Would they reach people in time? Could they stop the virus? Scientists believed so, but there was still much to do. Vaccines had to be stored at cold temperatures. Transportation was complicated. Some rural areas didn't have the right equipment. The logistics were difficult. In December, the first vaccinations began. Healthcare workers were first in line. A nurse in the UK became the first person to receive the Pfizer vaccine. Cameras captured the moment. People clapped. It was a historic day. Next came the elderly and high-risk groups. In nursing homes, residents rolled up their sleeves. They smiled for the cameras. For many, it felt like a new beginning. In the U.S., a doctor received the Moderna vaccine. She said, "This is the light at the end of the tunnel." But the rollout was not perfect. Some areas faced delays. Others ran out of doses. People grew impatient. They asked, "When will it be my turn?" Governments worked to fix the problems. Slowly, more doses became available. As 2021 began, more vaccines were approved. Johnson & Johnson developed a single-dose vaccine. AstraZeneca's vaccine was used in many countries. Each new approval brought more hope. Each new dose brought the world closer to safety. The vaccines were a triumph of science. In less than a year, teams had achieved the impossible. They had created solutions to a global problem. But the work was not over. Scientists warned, we must vaccinate as many people as possible. The virus is still spreading. Communities worked together to vaccinate their people. In India, volunteers helped elderly residents reach vaccination centers. In Israel, a mobile clinic brought vaccines to remote areas. In the U.S., stadiums became mass vaccination sites. Cars lined up for miles. Everyone wanted protection. Some people were hesitant. They worried about side effects. They doubted the vaccine's safety. Scientists and doctors explained, the vaccines are safe. They will protect you. Slowly, more people came forward. They realized the importance of the vaccine for themselves and their families. Vaccines brought stories of hope. A grandmother in Italy hugged her grandchildren for the first time in months. A doctor in Brazil smiled as his patients received their shots. In Japan, an elderly couple celebrated their vaccinations with a picnic. These moments showed the power of science and resilience. But the virus was not finished. Variants appeared. New versions of COVID-19. Some spread faster. Others were more dangerous. Scientists worked quickly to update the vaccines. They knew the fight was not over. The race for a vaccine had saved millions of lives. It was a story of teamwork, determination, and hope. It showed what humanity could achieve when faced with a crisis. The vaccines were a gift to the world. But they also came with a reminder. The pandemic was not truly over until everyone was safe. Chapter 9. The Challenges of Distribution. The vaccines were ready. For the first time in months, the world had hope. But getting vaccines to everyone was not easy. It was a race against time, and there were many challenges ahead. Scientists had created solutions, but now the world faced a new problem: distribution. Some countries moved quickly. In the United States, trucks carried vaccines to hospitals and clinics. In the United Kingdom, people lined up at community centers to get their shots. In Israel, mobile teams brought vaccines to remote areas. But not every country had this speed or resources. Many waited and waited. Vaccines needed special care. Some, like Pfizer's, had to be stored at very low temperatures. This required freezers, trucks, and careful planning. Richer nations had the equipment. Poorer countries struggled. A health worker in rural Africa asked, "How can we keep these vaccines cold when we don't even have electricity?" There were not enough doses for everyone. Wealthy countries bought millions of vaccines early. They secured deals with companies like Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca. Poorer nations were left behind. People began to ask, "Is this fair?" The answer was not simple. COVAX, a global program, promised to deliver vaccines to all countries. Its goal was to ensure fairness. But even COVAX faced challenges. Deliveries were delayed. Supply was limited. A volunteer in India said, "We must protect everyone, not just the rich." Arguments broke out over sharing. Some countries wanted to vaccinate their entire population before helping others. Others donated extra doses to those in need. The world learned sharing was harder than it seemed. In some places, vaccines were wasted. A clinic in the U.S. had to throw away doses because of a freezer failure. A shipment in Brazil was damaged during transport. Each loss was painful. Every dose mattered. There were also issues of trust. Some people feared the vaccine. They worried about side effects. They doubted its safety. Misinformation spread online, making the problem worse. Health workers tried to explain, "The vaccine is safe. It will protect you." Slowly, more people began to listen. In cities, long lines formed outside vaccination centers. People waited for hours, hoping for their turn. In rural areas, it was different. Many had to travel far to find a clinic. A mother in Kenya walked 10 kilometers with her baby to get vaccinated. She said, "It's worth it. I want to keep my family safe." Volunteers worked tirelessly. In Indonesia, they used boats to deliver vaccines to islands. In Canada, snowmobiles carried doses to remote villages. In Australia, small planes flew vaccines to the outback. These efforts brought hope, but the task was enormous. Supply chains were tested like never before. Factories had to produce millions of doses each week. Trucks, ships, and planes carried them across the globe. But delays happened. A snowstorm in Texas stopped deliveries for days. A factory in Europe faced production problems. These setbacks slowed progress. Leaders faced tough decisions. Who should get the vaccine first? In most countries, healthcare workers and the elderly were prioritized. But this left younger people waiting. A teenager in Mexico said, "I understand, But I'm scared too. I want to be safe. In some countries, corruption became a problem. Powerful people jumped the line. Vaccines were sold on the black market. A doctor in Argentina spoke out, saying, "This is not right. We must protect the most vulnerable first." Her words inspired others to demand fairness. Despite the challenges, there were successes. In Rwanda, drones delivered vaccines to remote areas. In Bhutan, nearly the entire population was vaccinated in just 1 week. These stories showed that with determination, progress was possible. The pandemic highlighted global inequalities. Some nations vaccinated millions within months. Others struggled to get even a few thousand doses. The gap was clear, and it was painful. A journalist in South Africa wrote, "The virus does not care about borders. Why do we?" Communities came together to solve problems. In India, volunteers set up free vaccine camps. In Nigeria, local leaders encouraged people to trust the vaccine. In Italy, pharmacies opened their doors to speed up vaccinations. These efforts made a difference. The vaccines brought hope, but they also revealed the complexity of the world. People wanted to believe in unity, but the reality was often divided. A teacher in Brazil said, "We must learn from this. Next time, we need to do better." As more doses became available, progress improved. Factories increased production. New vaccines were approved. By mid-2021, millions more were vaccinated each week. The pace was still too slow for some, but it was a step forward. The challenges of distribution taught the world many lessons. It showed the importance of preparation. It highlighted the need for global cooperation. And it reminded everyone that humanity's greatest strength is its ability to adapt. The journey was far from over. Variants of the virus appeared, creating new concerns. Scientists worked to update vaccines. Governments prepared for booster shots. The fight against COVID-19 continued, but there was hope. The story of vaccine distribution was one of struggle and perseverance. It showed the world's flaws, but also its potential. It was not perfect, but it was progress. And progress was something to celebrate. Chapter 10. Life in Lockdown. When the pandemic spread, life changed overnight. Cities became silent. Offices, schools, and shops closed their doors. People stayed home. At first it felt strange. How long would this last? Nobody knew. But slowly, people began to adapt. Schools moved online. Children sat in front of computers instead of desks. Teachers learned to use webcams and microphones. "Can you hear me?" became a common question. Some students enjoyed studying from home. Others missed their friends and the classroom. Parents tried to help, balancing work and their children's education. It was not easy. Work also changed. Many offices closed and people worked remotely. Living rooms became offices. Kitchen tables turned into desks. Meetings happened on video calls. Dogs barked in the background. Children interrupted important discussions. It was frustrating, but people found ways to laugh about it. Social life moved to screens, too. Families had virtual dinners. Friends played games online. Birthdays were celebrated with video calls. A grandmother in Italy smiled as her family sang "Happy Birthday" from 4 different cities. It wasn't the same, but it was something. Weddings became smaller. Some couples postponed their special day. Others got married over Zoom. A bride in New York stood in her living room, wearing a white dress. Her groom smiled from his screen. Their friends and family cheered from little squares on the screen. It was unusual, but it was beautiful. Funerals also moved online. This was much harder. Families could not gather to say goodbye. They lit candles at home. They shared memories over video calls. It was heartbreaking, but they tried to find comfort in each other's words. Everyday tasks became more complicated. Grocery shopping was no longer simple. People wore masks and gloves. They stood in long lines, staying 6 feet apart. At home, they washed their hands constantly. Some wiped down every item they bought. Others learned to bake bread and cook meals from scratch. Gyms were closed, so people exercised at home. Yoga mats appeared in living rooms. People went for walks in their neighborhoods. Parks became places of escape. A jogger in London said, "Fresh air is my therapy." Small routines like this helped people stay sane. Children found creative ways to have fun. They built forts from blankets. They drew pictures and hung them in windows. In Germany, they painted rainbows with the words, "Alles wird gut." Everything will be okay. These small acts of hope inspired their neighbors. Artists also adapted. Musicians gave online concerts. A violinist in Spain played on his balcony. His music echoed through the empty streets. Writers shared poems on social media. Painters created art that reflected the strange times. Their work reminded everyone that beauty still existed. Entertainment changed, too. Movie theaters closed, but streaming services thrived. Families watched films together at home. A mother in Canada said, "We have movie nights every Friday now. It's something to look forward to." People found joy in the little things. Lockdowns were hard on relationships. Couples spent more time together than ever before. Some grew closer. Others struggled. A husband in Australia joked, "I've learned that my wife doesn't like how I load the dishwasher." Families laughed and fought, but they also learned to appreciate each other. For single people, isolation was tough. Dating became virtual. People met on apps and had video dates. A woman in Brazil shared, "We cooked the same meal in our own kitchens. It was strange but fun." Love found a way, even in lockdown. Mental health became a major concern. The constant news of the virus was overwhelming. Many people felt lonely. Others were anxious or depressed. Therapists offered online sessions. Friends checked on each other with simple messages. "How are you?" These small gestures mattered. Pets became sources of comfort. Dogs and cats brought joy to their owners. In the Netherlands, shelters ran out of animals to adopt because so many people wanted pets. A man in Tokyo said, "My dog keeps me company." He reminds me that I'm not alone. Lockdowns were especially hard for the elderly. Many could not see their families. Grandparents missed hugs from their grandchildren. Nursing homes became isolated. Staff worked hard to keep residents safe and happy. In France, a caregiver arranged video calls for her patients. She said, "Their smiles make it worth it." Religious practices also changed. Churches, mosques, and temples closed their doors. Services moved online. A priest in India streamed daily prayers. A rabbi in New York held virtual Shabbat dinners. People lit candles at home and prayed for the world. Not everyone followed the rules. Some ignored lockdown orders. They held parties or went to crowded places. This made others angry. A doctor in South Africa said, "Please stay home. You're saving lives." Most people listened, but it was frustrating when others did not. Despite the challenges, people found ways to stay hopeful. Communities came together. In Ireland, neighbors left groceries on doorsteps for those in need. In Canada, people placed teddy bears in windows for children to spot during walks. In Japan, a man gave free masks to strangers on the street. These small acts of kindness made a big difference. Technology played a key role. It connected people across the world. A teacher in Kenya taught her students through WhatsApp. A couple in France watched the Eiffel Tower sparkle together over FaceTime. A young boy in the US played video games with his cousin in Australia. These moments brought people closer. Some people used the lockdown to try new things. They learned languages, played instruments, or started gardens. A woman in Argentina grew tomatoes for the first time. She laughed, "They're small, but they're mine." Others read books they had always meant to read or wrote in journals about their experiences. As months passed, lockdowns eased in some places. People returned to work and school. Restaurants opened with new rules. But life was not the same. Masks stayed on. Social distancing continued. The world had changed forever. The lockdowns taught people to appreciate simple things: a walk outside, a hug, a shared meal. They reminded everyone that humans are adaptable and resilient. Even in the hardest times, people found ways to laugh, love, and survive. Life in lockdown was challenging, but it was also a time of growth. Families grew closer. Communities supported each other. Strangers showed kindness. The world faced a great challenge, but it did not lose hope. Chapter 11. Loss and Love. The pandemic brought loss on a scale the world had never seen. The virus took millions of lives. Families mourned. Communities grieved. Each person lost was someone's parent, child, sibling, or friend. The pain was deep, and it touched every corner of the globe. Hospitals were full of sorrow. A nurse in Spain held the hand of a patient who couldn't breathe. She whispered, "You are not alone." A doctor in Brazil cried after losing a young father. In India, a mother begged for oxygen for her son. For many, there was no time to say goodbye. Funerals became small and lonely. Families gathered on video calls to share memories. A man in Italy lit a candle for his mother. He said, Her light will never go out. In the United States, a woman planted a tree to honor her brother. These acts of remembrance brought comfort, but the loss was still heavy. The virus didn't just take lives, it also took livelihoods. Businesses closed. Millions lost their jobs. A baker in South Africa had to shut down his shop. A teacher in the Philippines couldn't pay her rent. Families struggled to buy food. A man in Brazil said, "I have nothing left, but I will not give up." Some lost their homes. In the United Kingdom, a young family moved into a shelter. In Indonesia, a woman and her children slept in a car. But even in these moments of despair, kindness appeared. A neighbor in Canada opened her home to a family in need. A charity in Mexico gave free meals to those without homes. Stories of survival brought hope. A grandmother in India beat the virus at age 103. Her family celebrated with laughter and tears. A nurse in Italy survived after 40 days in the hospital. Her first words were, "Thank you for saving me." A baby in Brazil was born prematurely, but he fought through the odds. These stories reminded the world that life was precious. Acts of kindness shone bright during the darkest times. In New York City, a restaurant owner gave free meals to healthcare workers. In Japan, a group of students delivered groceries to elderly neighbors. In Kenya, a young man donated his savings to buy masks for strangers. These gestures showed the power of love. Courage also stood out. Healthcare workers risked their lives every day. A doctor in Peru worked for months without seeing her children. A paramedic in Nigeria carried patients on his back when ambulances were full. They didn't stop, even when they were scared. Their bravery inspired the world. Families found strength in each other. A mother in France taught her children to sew masks for their community. A father in India turned his small farm into a vegetable stand to feed his village. In Canada, two sisters raised money for a local hospital by baking cookies. These small acts brought big hope. Communities came together. In Spain, neighbors shared food and supplies. In South Korea, volunteers cleaned public spaces to keep people safe. In Thailand, monks blessed hospitals and delivered meals to patients. Everywhere, people worked to help one another. Artists and musicians also brought healing. A pianist in Germany played in an empty church, streaming the music online. A poet in South Africa wrote about finding beauty in hard times. In Australia, street performers sang outside hospitals to cheer up staff and patients. Art reminded everyone that the human spirit could not be broken. Faith gave comfort to many. In Brazil, people prayed from their windows every evening. In India, temples and mosques offered shelter to the homeless. In Italy, church bells rang to honor the lives lost. Belief in something greater gave people strength to carry on. Even in grief, there was love. A woman in Japan sent letters to her sick father every day. A boy in Nigeria drew pictures for his sister in the hospital. A man in Mexico donated blood after surviving COVID-19, saying, "This is my way to give back. These small actions showed the world's capacity for compassion. Leaders and volunteers worked to bring relief. A mayor in Canada turned his office into a food bank. A teacher in Indonesia started an online class to help children who couldn't afford school. In the UK, a retired nurse returned to work to help care for patients. Their dedication made a difference. Hope was found in unexpected places. A child in Australia planted a garden saying, "It makes me happy to see things grow." A woman in Argentina started painting again after years of sadness. A teenager in the U.S. raised money by running a marathon in her backyard. These small victories reminded people to keep going. As the pandemic continued, the world learned to heal. Families created new traditions. Communities grew stronger. Strangers became friends. The virus had brought pain, but it had also revealed humanity's strength. Loss and love were deeply connected. For every life lost, there was a story of remembrance. For every struggle, there was an act of kindness. For every tear, there was a moment of courage. These stories taught the world to value what truly mattered. The pandemic tested humanity, but it also revealed its greatest strengths: love, resilience, and hope. The world mourned, but it also celebrated survival. The virus took much, but it could not take away the human spirit. Chapter 12. A New Beginning. The virus changed the world forever. It brought loss, fear, and challenges. But it also taught people important lessons. It showed them how to adapt, how to care for one another, and how to keep moving forward. The virus was not gone, but life was starting again. As vaccines reached more people, hope grew. Families reunited after months apart. A grandmother in Canada hugged her grandchildren for the first time in a year. A father in India smiled as he saw his daughter get married. These moments reminded everyone that love was stronger than fear. Schools reopened, but they looked different. Desks were farther apart. Teachers wore masks. Children washed their hands more often. In some places, lessons stayed online. Students and teachers worked hard to adapt. A girl in Japan said, "I missed my friends, but I am happy to learn again." Workplaces also changed. Many people returned to offices, but others stayed home. Remote work became normal. Meetings happened on screens. A man in Brazil joked, "I still wear my slippers to work." Companies found new ways to be flexible, and employees learned to balance life and work differently. Travel slowly resumed. Airports reopened. People wore masks on planes. Some traveled to see loved ones, while others explored new places. A woman in Italy cried as she visited her parents after 2 years. A family in Australia took their first vacation together since the pandemic began. These journeys brought joy and healing. Communities began to rebuild. In small towns, neighbors supported local businesses. In big cities, restaurants opened outdoor seating. A cafe owner in Paris said, "We survived because of our customers' kindness." Farmers' markets, parks, and festivals came alive again. life felt brighter. People learned to live with the virus. Masks, hand sanitizer, and social distancing became part of everyday life. Governments reminded everyone to stay cautious. Scientists continued to study the virus and its variants. The world worked together to stay safe. Some changes were permanent. Healthcare systems became stronger. Hospitals prepared for future pandemics. Doctors and nurses shared their knowledge. A doctor in South Africa said, "We are ready for anything now." These improvements saved lives and gave people confidence. Technology played a key role in the new normal. Virtual meetings, online shopping, and telemedicine became common. A grandmother in the U.S. learned to use video calls to see her family. A teacher in Kenya used apps to connect with her students. Technology brought people closer, even when they were far apart. Communities grew stronger. People helped each other in big and small ways. In Spain, a man started a free library to share books with his neighbors. In Brazil, a woman taught sewing classes to help people start businesses. These acts of kindness showed the power of unity. Art and culture flourished. Musicians performed live again. Theaters reopened. Museums welcomed visitors back. A pianist in Germany said, "Music is medicine for the soul." People celebrated creativity, knowing it had helped them through tough times. Nature also became more important. During lockdowns, many people found peace in parks, mountains, and beaches. Now, they worked to protect the environment. Communities planted trees. Companies reduced waste. Families chose greener ways to live. A boy in India said, "The earth is our home. We must take care of it." The virus had brought many lessons. It reminded people to appreciate simple things: a smile, a shared meal, a hug, a sunrise. These small moments became treasures. A woman in Argentina said, "I lost much, but I gained a new way of seeing life." People also learned the value of health. Exercise, healthy eating, and mental well-being became priorities. Yoga classes filled up. Running clubs grew. A man in Japan said, "Taking care of my body helps me take care of my mind." This focus on health made communities stronger. Families became closer. Parents spent more time with their children. Siblings supported each other. Grandparents shared wisdom. A mother in Nigeria said, "The pandemic showed me what really matters: my family." These connections created bonds that would last a lifetime. Faith and hope played a big role in recovery. Churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues reopened. People prayed together again. They lit candles, sang songs, and gave thanks. A priest in Italy said, "Hope carried us through the storm." Not everything was easy. Some people were still afraid. Others were tired from the long fight. But together, the world moved forward. They had survived the worst. Now, they looked to the future with courage. Young people led the way. They shared ideas, started projects, and created change. A girl in Canada raised money for families in need. A boy in Kenya designed a hand-washing station for his school. Their energy and creativity inspired everyone. Governments worked to build a better world. Leaders promised to improve healthcare, education, and jobs. They focused on fairness and equality. A mayor in Mexico said, "We must never forget what the virus taught us. We are all connected." The world also remembered those who were lost. Families lit candles, planted trees, and built memorials. A park in New York became a place to honor healthcare workers. In India, a temple added the names of lost loved ones to its walls. These acts of remembrance kept their memories alive. As time passed, the virus became less frightening. Vaccines and treatments improved. Life felt safer. But people never forgot the lessons of the pandemic. They knew the importance of being prepared. They knew the power of kindness. And they knew that together they could face anything. The pandemic was a test of humanity. It brought pain, but it also brought growth. It showed the strength of the human spirit. The world was different now, but it was stronger too. People had learned to adapt, to care, and to hope. A new beginning had arrived. It wasn't perfect, but it was full of possibility. The future was brighter, and the world was ready. Together, people would create a better tomorrow. Together, they would write the next chapter of their story. And it would be one of resilience, love, and hope.